Lila stood in their bedroom watching her husband pack for his mother's birthday weekend, her hands trembling around the coffee mug she'd been holding for 20 minutes. "Lila, please understand," Elliot said without meeting her eyes. "Mother's turning 70. If you come, she'll make a scene. She'll ruin her own party just to—" He finally looked at her. "You'd make everyone uncomfortable. It's better if you stay home." The coffee had gone cold. Lila couldn't remember the last time she'd taken a sip. She watched her husband, the man who'd promised to love her through everything, fold dress shirts into his leather weekender with practiced precision. Each fold felt like another layer of her dignity being packed away. Better for whom? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Better for your mother? Better for you? Or better for the 150 guests who might have to acknowledge that Elliot Andrews married a black woman? He flinched. Good. At least she could still make him feel something. That's not fair. He moved to his tie rack, selecting 3 without looking at her. Navy, charcoal, burgundy. The same ones he wore to board meetings when he needed to project authority. "You know how difficult she's been. This weekend is important to her. And our marriage isn't?" The question hung between them like smoke. Elliot's hand stilled on a 4th tie, silver, with subtle pinstripes, the one she'd given him for their first anniversary. He stared at it for a long moment, then put it back. That small rejection hurt more than anything he'd said. Lila set the mug down on her nightstand with careful control. Her hands wanted to shake, her voice wanted to break, her heart wanted to shatter into pieces small enough to slip through the cracks in their hardwood floors. But she'd learned something in the 3 years since she'd married into the Andrews family. Dignity was the only armor that couldn't be stripped away. "When we got married," she said quietly, "you told me your family would come around. That love would be enough. That we just needed time." Elliot finally turned to face her fully. His jaw was tight, his blue eyes clouded with something that might have been guilt or might have been frustration. With him, it was getting harder to tell the difference. "They will. They are. This is just... it's complicated. It's been 3 years, Elliot. I know. 3 years of separate holidays, 3 years of excuses, 3 years of me being the dirty secret you keep in a penthouse in Manhattan while your family pretends I don't exist. You're not a secret." But his voice lacked conviction. Lila walked to their dresser where their wedding photo sat in a Tiffany frame. She picked it up, studying the image. She'd been radiant that day in her Vera Wang gown, glowing with hope and possibility. Elliot had looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. Behind them in the photo, the small gathering of guests told the real story. Her family, her brother Joe, her parents, her aunts and uncles and cousins, filled the left side of the frame. On Elliot's side stood exactly one person, his sister Caroline, looking uncomfortable but present. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Lila asked, still looking at the photo. "Right before we walked down the aisle?" Elliot's silence was answer enough. He didn't remember. "You said, 'They'll see. Once they see how happy we are, once they see how much we love each other, none of the rest will matter.'" She set the frame down gently. "When does that happen, Elliot? When do they see?" "Lila, when do I stop being invisible? When do I stop being the inconvenience you have to manage? When do I get to be your wife in front of the people who matter to you? You matter to me. But not enough." The words settled between them with the weight of truth. Elliot opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a man drowning in shallow water, unable to find his footing in a place where he should have been able to stand. "It's one weekend," he finally said. "One birthday party. After this, we'll sit down with Mother. We'll have a real conversation about boundaries and respect and—" "Stop." Lila held up her hand. "Just stop. We've had this conversation before. After Thanksgiving, after Christmas, after Easter, after her charity gala where she introduced me to the mayor as the help, and you said nothing. After the family portrait session where I wasn't invited, and you posed for pictures without me. How many conversations do we need to have before something actually changes?" Elliot's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He glanced at it, then looked away quickly. But Lila had seen the name on the screen. Patricia Andrews. His mother calling to confirm he was coming alone. The betrayal of it, the casual, coordinated betrayal, made something crack inside Lila's chest. "Go," she said softly. "Go to your mother's party. Celebrate her birthday. drink champagne with people who think I'm not good enough to breathe the same air, smile for photographs that I'll never be in, have a wonderful time. Lila, please don't do this. Do what? Make you choose. Because that's what this is, Elliot. Every time you ask me to stay home, every time you make an excuse, every time you protect their comfort over my dignity, you're choosing. You've been choosing for 3 years. I'm just finally seeing it clearly. Elliot crossed the room toward her, reaching for her hands. She let him take them, let him hold them between his own. His skin was warm, his grip was gentle. Once upon a time, that touch had felt like coming home. Now it felt like goodbye. I love you, he said, and she could hear the desperation in his voice. You know I love you. I know you love me in private, in our apartment, in our bed, behind closed doors where no one from your world can see. She pulled her hands away gently. But I need to be loved in public too. I need to be claimed, not hidden. I need to be your wife, not your secret. You're being unfair. The accusation stung because part of her wondered if he was right. Maybe she was being unreasonable. Maybe she was asking for too much. Maybe she should be grateful that he loved her at all, that he'd married her despite his family's objections, that he came home to her every night, even if he couldn't take her to his mother's birthday party. But then Lila thought about her own mother, about the way her father looked at her mother like she hung the moon. She thought about Joe and his wife Shanice, about the way Joe introduced Shanice to everyone they met with pride in his voice. This is my wife Shanice. Isn't she amazing? She thought about the kind of love she'd dreamed of as a girl, the kind of love she'd thought she was getting when Elliot proposed under the stars in Central Park. That love didn't ask her to make herself smaller. That love didn't ask her to disappear. Maybe I am being unfair, Lila said. Maybe wanting to attend my husband's family events is asking too much. Maybe expecting you to defend me to your mother is unreasonable. Maybe hoping that 3 years would be enough time for your family to accept me was naive. She moved past him toward the bedroom door. But I'd rather be unfair and alone than fair and invisible. Where are you going? I need some air. I need to think. I need to be somewhere where I don't feel like I'm suffocating. She left him standing in their bedroom, surrounded by his perfectly packed luggage and his perfectly preserved relationship with his family. She walked through their apartment, the penthouse he'd bought with his trust fund money, decorated by an interior designer who'd never asked Lila's opinion. She passed the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the chef's kitchen where they rarely cooked because Elliot preferred restaurants, the study lined with leather-bound books that no one ever read. Everything was beautiful, everything was expensive, everything was suffocating. Lila grabbed her coat and purse and left, pulling the door shut behind her with a soft click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence she hadn't meant to finish. The November air hit her face like a slap, cold and sharp and clarifying. She walked without direction, her feet carrying her down Fifth Avenue, while her mind spiraled through 3 years of accumulating wounds. Each memory rose up like a ghost, demanding to be acknowledged. Their engagement party, where Patricia had pulled Elliot aside for 30 minutes, returning with red-rimmed eyes and tight lips. Elliot had been distant the rest of the night, and when Lila asked what was wrong, he'd said, "Nothing. Mother just needs time to adjust." Their first Christmas as a married couple, spent separately because Patricia had made it clear that Lila wasn't welcome at the Andrews family estate in Connecticut. Elliot had promised it would be different next year. It hadn't been. The time they'd run into one of Elliot's prep school friends at a restaurant, and Elliot had introduced Lila as his friend because his college reunion was coming up, and he didn't want drama. She'd left the restaurant and walked home alone. He'd shown up 3 hours later with roses and apologies and promises that meant nothing. The investment firm event where Patricia had loudly asked who invited the caterer when Lila was standing right there in a Marchesa gown that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Elliot had laughed it off as a misunderstanding, as if the venom in his mother's voice hadn't been crystal clear. Her phone buzzed. Joe. "Hey, little sis, haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything good?" Lila's throat closed. She couldn't speak. If she started talking, she'd start crying. And if she started crying on a Manhattan sidewalk, she might never stop. "Lila?" Joe's voice sharpened with concern. Talk to me. What happened? I can't do this anymore, she whispered. Can't do what? Where are you? I don't know. Walking. Joe, I can't keep doing this. Doing what? His voice was gentle now, coaxing. Being invisible, being tolerated, being the wife he loves but won't defend. His mother's turning 70 this weekend, and he asked me not to come. He said I'd make people uncomfortable. He said it would be better if I stayed home. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then Joe said, with controlled fury, Where is he right now? Home, packing. And where are you? I don't know, somewhere near the park. Stay there, I'm coming to get you. Joe, you don't have to. I'm already in the car, send me your location. And Lila. He paused. You're not invisible. You're the most brilliant woman I know. You built a 6-figure marketing firm from nothing. You're kind and strong, and you deserve someone who's proud to stand next to you. If Elliot Andrews can't see that, he's the one who's blind. Lila closed her eyes against the tears. I love him. I know. But the question is, does he love you enough? That was the question, wasn't it? The one Lila had been avoiding for 3 years, the one that kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling while Elliot slept peacefully beside her. The one that made her stomach clench every time his phone rang and Patricia's name appeared on the screen. She sent Joe her location and waited on a bench near the park entrance, watching families walk past. A couple with a toddler, an elderly man with a small dog, 2 teenagers holding hands, looking at each other like they'd just discovered fire. Had she and Elliot ever looked at each other like that? She thought maybe they had in the beginning, before reality set in, before she understood what marrying into the Andrews family would cost her. She remembered their first date, a gallery opening in Chelsea that Lila had been attending for work. She'd been there representing her. Boutique marketing firm, schmoozing with potential clients, when Elliot had approached her near a sculpture made of twisted metal and colored glass. What do you think it means? He'd asked, gesturing to the sculpture. Lila had studied it, tilting her head. I think it means the artist got paid a lot of money to weld random objects together. Elliot had laughed, a real laugh, surprised and delighted. Finally, someone honest. They'd spent the next hour talking, circling the gallery, debating the merit of modern art and the pretension of the Manhattan social scene. He'd been charming and self-deprecating, making fun of his own privileged background, with the ease of someone who'd never actually experienced hardship, but at least had the awareness to recognize his advantages. When he'd asked for her number, Lila had hesitated. She'd dated white men before, enough to know that sometimes attraction didn't translate to actual compatibility, that sometimes chemistry dissolved when family and future entered the conversation. But there'd been something in his eyes, something genuine and warm, that made her say yes. Their courtship had been a whirlwind, expensive restaurants and weekend trips to the Hamptons, late-night conversations and early morning coffee. He'd introduced her to his sister Caroline within a month, and Caroline had been wonderful, welcoming and warm and genuinely happy for them. Mother will be difficult, Caroline had warned over brunch, but don't take it personally. She's difficult with everyone. But Lila had seen the worry in Caroline's eyes even then, the way she'd glanced at Elliot and bitten her lip. She'd known, even if she hadn't said it directly. Patricia Andrews wasn't just difficult, she was bigoted, and she would make Lila's life miserable. Elliot had proposed after 8 months of dating, Central Park at sunset, down on one knee with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I want forever with you, he'd said. I want to build a life with you. I want to show you every day how extraordinary you are. And she'd believed him. God, she'd believed him with her whole heart. Joe's car pulled up to the curb. Her brother got out, took one look at her face, and pulled her into a hug. Lila let herself be held, let herself feel small and protected and safe for the first time in months. Come on, Joe said gently. Let's get you home. That is home. No, it's not. Home is where you're loved properly. That's just an expensive cage. They drove to Joe and Shanice's brownstone in Brooklyn. Shanice met them at the door, took one look at Lila's face, and immediately ushered her inside without questions. Within minutes, Lila was on their couch with a cup of tea, wrapped in one of Shanice's soft throws, while Joe paced the living room with barely contained rage. I want to drive to Connecticut and knock some sense into him, Joe said. That won't help, Shanice said calmly. She sat next to Lila, rubbing her back in slow circles. What do you need, Lila? What do you want to happen? That was the question, wasn't it? What did Lila want? She wanted Elliot to grow a spine. She wanted Patricia Andrews to spontaneously develop empathy. She wanted the last 3 years to have been different, easier, less painful. She wanted to go back to that moment in Central Park when Elliot proposed and asked better questions, demand clearer answers, understand what she was really signing up for. But what she said was, I want to stop feeling like I'm not enough. You are enough, Shanice said fiercely. You're more than enough. You're a whole person, complete and brilliant and worthy exactly as you are. If his family can't see that, it's their poverty, not yours. Lila's phone buzzed. Elliot, I'm sorry, I know I hurt you. I know I've been handling this badly. Can we talk when I get back? Joe read over her shoulder and made a disgusted sound. When he gets back, not, I'm not going, not, you're right, I should stay. Just, when I get back. He was right. Even in his apology, Elliot was still choosing his mother's party over his wife's pain. Lila turned off her phone. I need to think, she said. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. You can stay here as long as you need, Shanice offered. We have the guest room. You don't have to go back there if you're not ready. But Lila knew she would go back. The penthouse held all her things, her life, her clothes, her work files. She'd built her business from that apartment, taking calls and sending proposals from the study that Elliot never used. She couldn't just abandon it all, couldn't just walk away from 3 years of her life because one conversation had gone badly. Except it hadn't been just one conversation. It had been 1,000 small cuts, 1,000 tiny humiliations, 1,000 moments of being asked to make herself smaller so that Elliot's family could remain comfortable in their prejudice. How many times had she made excuses for him? How many times had she told herself it would get better, that love was enough, that patience was a virtue? How many times had she swallowed her hurt and smiled through gatherings where she was the only black face, where people asked her where she was really from and whether her hair was real, and if she spoke English at home? She thought about her parents, about the way her father had fought for her mother when his own family had objected to their relationship. Her father had been raised in a strict Nigerian household with expectations about who he would marry. But when he'd fallen in love with her mother, a black American woman from Alabama, he'd made his choice clear. He'd told his family that they could accept his wife or lose him. They'd chosen acceptance. It hadn't been easy, but he'd fought for it, for her mother, for their relationship, for their future. Why wasn't Elliot fighting for her? Lila spent the rest of the day at Joe and Shanice's, letting them feed her and comfort her and remind her of her own worth. But when evening came, she called a car to take her home. She couldn't hide in Brooklyn forever. She had to face her life, whatever that life was going to look like. The penthouse was dark when she returned. Elliot had left for Connecticut. The apartment felt cavernous and cold, all that expensive emptiness mocking her. She walked through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. Nothing here was really hers. The furniture, the art, the designer dishes, all of it had been here when she moved in. She'd added small touches over the years, but the bones of the place belonged to Elliot and his family money and his carefully cultivated aesthetic. She was just a visitor in her own home. Lila went to her laptop and opened her browser. She typed in the address for the Andrews family estate in Connecticut. She'd never been there, but she'd seen enough photos to know what it looked like. Sprawling, elegant, historic, the kind of property that appeared in architectural magazines, all manicured gardens and tasteful luxury. Then she looked up Patricia Andrews' birthday party. It wasn't hard to find information. The Andrews family was old money, the kind of old money that made the society pages. Sure enough, there were articles about Patricia's 70th birthday celebration, a garden party at the estate, 150 guests, a 6-piece orchestra, catering by a Michelin-starred chef, and not one mention of Elliot's wife. Lila stared at the screen for a long time, making a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. She could stay home like Elliot had asked. She could be the good wife who understood that sometimes love meant sacrifice, that sometimes patience meant swallowing your pride, that sometimes marriage meant accepting half of what you deserved. Or she could show up, She could put on her most beautiful dress, drive to Connecticut, and walk into that party with her head held high. She could force them to see her, to acknowledge her, to admit that she existed. She could stop being invisible. The idea was crazy. It was confrontational. It was exactly the kind of scene that Elliot feared, the kind of drama that Patricia would never forgive, which was exactly why Lila was going to do it. She picked up her phone and called Joe. "Hey," she said when he answered, "remember when you said I'm not invisible? I need you to help me prove it. I'm going to that party." Joe was quiet for a moment, and then he laughed, a low, proud sound. "That's my sister. What do you need?" "Everything." If you're loving Lila's journey from invisible to undeniable, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what happens when she crashes Patricia's exclusive party. Trust me, you need to see this confrontation. Chapter 2. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of November day that made everything look sharp and defined, like the world had been outlined in ink. Lila stood in front of her closet, staring at rows of designer clothing that suddenly felt like armor for a battle she'd been avoiding for 3 years. She needed to look perfect, not just beautiful, perfect, undeniable. The kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone forget what they'd been talking about. She pulled out a dress she'd bought 6 months ago and never worn, a Roland Mouret gown in deep emerald silk that hugged every curve before flowing into an elegant train. It was sophisticated and powerful, the kind of dress that said she belonged anywhere she chose to stand. She'd bought it for a charity gala that Elliot had attended without her, another event where his mother would be present, and Lila's absence was just easier. Today, the dress would make a different statement. She spent 2 hours on her appearance, hair in soft waves that cascaded over her shoulders, makeup subtle but flawless, emphasizing her warm brown eyes and full lips. Diamond studs, a wedding gift from Elliot that caught the light when she moved. Nude heels that added 3 inches to her height. The effect was stunning. She looked like royalty. She looked like someone's wife. Shanice arrived at noon with Joe, both of them dressed like they were going to war. Joe wore a tailored charcoal suit that made him look like he ran Fortune 500 companies. Shanice was elegant in burgundy, her locks styled in an elaborate updo, her makeup highlighting her striking cheekbones. "We're going with you," Joe said before Lila could protest. "Non-negotiable." "You don't have to. We know we don't have to. We want to." Shanice squeezed her hand. "Nobody faces that family alone. You're going to walk in there with your head high and your family proud, and those people are going to have to deal with the fact that you're not going anywhere." They drove to Connecticut in Joe's Mercedes, the city slowly giving way to suburbs and then to the kind of countryside where properties were measured in acres instead of square feet. The Andrews estate was in Greenwich, behind gates that probably cost more than Lila's first apartment. The closer they got, the more Lila's heart hammered. What was she doing? Elliot had asked her not to come. She was crashing his mother's birthday party uninvited, bringing her brother and sister-in-law as backup, about to create exactly the kind of scene that would make headlines in the society pages. But then she remembered his face when he'd asked her to stay home, the way he'd packed his luggage without meeting her eyes, the way he'd put back the tie she'd given him, like even that small connection to her was too risky to take with him. And she remembered all the times before, all the holidays alone, all the events she'd been excluded from, all the moments when she'd been asked to shrink and fade and disappear. She was done disappearing. They pulled up to the gates at 2 p.m. A security guard approached the car, clipboard in hand. "Name?" "Lila Grant Andrews," she said clearly, using the hyphenated name that Elliot never used when introducing her. "I am Elliot Andrews' wife." The guard checked his list, frowned. "I don't have you on the guest list, ma'am. That's because my husband was supposed to add me and forgot. Call up to the house, ask for Elliot, tell him his wife is here." The guard looked uncertain, but he made the call. Lila watched his face as he spoke to someone at the main house, watched the confusion turn to surprise, turn to something that might have been pity. "You can go up," he finally said, opening the gates. "Follow the drive to the main house." The estate was exactly as ridiculous as Lila had imagined. Rolling lawns, formal gardens, a fountain that belonged in a European plaza. The main house was a sprawling Georgian mansion, all white columns and massive windows, the kind of property that had been in the family for generations and probably had a name like Meadowbrook or Whitehaven. Cars lined the circular drive, Mercedes, BMWs, a Bentley, a vintage Rolls-Royce. Old money on display. Lila's stomach clenched. They parked and walked toward the entrance. Lila could hear music drifting from the back of the house, the tinkling sounds of a string quartet mixing with conversation and laughter. The party was in full swing. A server in formal livery stood at the front door. His eyes widened when he saw Lila. "Good afternoon," Lila said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here for Mrs. Andrews's birthday celebration." "Of course, ma'am. The party is through the house and out to the garden. May I take your coat?" She handed over her wrap, revealing the full effect of the emerald gown. The server's eyes widened further. "Good." They walked through the house, and Lila tried not to gape at the opulence. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, oil paintings in gilded frames that were probably worth more than her entire business. This was where Elliot had grown up, surrounded by this kind of casual wealth, this kind of inherited privilege. No wonder he couldn't stand up to his mother. He'd been trained since birth to preserve this world, to protect it, to keep it exactly as it had always been. And Lila was change. Lila was disruption. Lila was everything that scared people who built walls around their perfect lives. They stepped out onto the terrace, and the party spread before them like a scene from a movie. The garden had been transformed into an elegant outdoor venue. White tents with flowing fabric, tables with crystal and china, flowers everywhere, roses and hydrangeas, and orchids arranged in stunning displays. The guests were exactly what Lila expected. Mostly white, mostly old money, mostly people who probably summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Palm Beach. And there, near the center of it all, was Elliot. He stood with a group of people, holding a champagne flute, laughing at something someone had said. He looked relaxed in a way he rarely did at home, like being here let him breathe. Easier. Like being away from her was a relief. Then he saw her. The blood drained from his face. He froze mid-laugh, champagne halfway to his lips, staring at her like she was a ghost who'd materialized from his nightmares. The people around him noticed his reaction, turning to see what had captured his attention. Lila lifted her chin and walked down the terrace steps into the garden, Joe and Shanice flanking her like an honor guard. Every head turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The quartet kept playing, but even the music seemed to fade into the background as 150 pairs of eyes focused on the black woman in the emerald dress who'd just crashed Patricia Andrews' birthday party. Elliot set down his champagne and started toward her, his face a mixture of shock and panic, and something that might have been anger. "Lila," he reached her, gripping her elbow. "What are you doing here?" She pulled her arm away gently. "Hello, Elliot. Happy birthday to your mother. I'm sorry I'm late. You can't be here." "Actually, I can. I'm your wife. This is your mother's party. It seems like exactly the place I should be. We talked about this." "No, you told me not to come. You didn't ask. You didn't discuss. You gave me an order like I'm something you own instead of someone you love." She kept her voice calm, aware of the audience gathering around them. "But I've decided I'm done accepting orders. I'm your wife, Elliot, and I'm here." His jaw clenched. Behind him, Lila could see more guests gathering, drawn by the drama like moths to flame. She recognized some faces from photos Elliot had shown her. Prep school friends, family friends, business associates, all of them white, all of them staring. "Elliot?" A woman's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Who were these people? Patricia Andrews emerged from the crowd like a queen approaching unworthy subjects. She was exactly as Lila remembered from the few times they'd crossed paths, tall, silver-haired, dressed in cream Chanel with pearls that probably cost more than a car. Beautiful in the way that rich white women of a certain age often were, maintained by personal trainers and dermatologists, and the kind of yoga retreats that cost $5,000 a week. Her eyes swept over Lila, over Joe and Shanice, with the kind of cold assessment that would have made a weaker person wilt. "Mother," Elliot said, his voice strained, I know who she is." Patricia's smile was arctic. "I'm just surprised to see her here. I wasn't aware we'd expanded the guest list to include unexpected visitors. I'm not a visitor, Lila said calmly. I'm family. I'm your son's wife. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia's smile tightened. Of course. How silly of me. I suppose the invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. She looked at Joe and Shanice. And you've brought friends. My brother Joe and his wife Shanice. They were kind enough to drive me since my husband had already left. That landed like a blow. Lila saw several guests exchange glances, saw the judgment forming. A husband who left without his wife for his mother's party? What kind of marriage was that? Patricia recovered quickly. Well, how thoughtful. Though I'm afraid we weren't prepared for additional guests. The seating chart is already arranged. That's no problem, Lila said smoothly. I'm sure we can find somewhere to sit. We wouldn't want to be any trouble. The statement was polite, but everyone there understood the subtext. She was calling out the rudeness, the exclusion, the careful planning that had been designed specifically to keep her away. Of course not, Patricia said, her voice dripping with false warmth. Elliot, darling, why don't you help your wife find a seat? I really must return to my other guests. She swept away, leaving Elliot standing there looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Lila, please, he said quietly. Let's not do this here. Do what? Exist? Be seen? Act like we're married? She kept her voice low but firm. I came to celebrate your mother's birthday, Elliot. That's all. I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to be your wife. You're causing problems just by being here. The honesty of it was brutal. At least he'd stopped pretending. Then maybe the problems were already here, Lila said. Maybe they've been here for 3 years and I've just been too polite to point them out. A woman approached, Carolyn, Elliot's sister. She looked between Elliot and Lila with worried eyes, then smiled warmly at Lila. Lila, what a wonderful surprise. Caroline hugged her, and the gesture was so genuine that Lila felt tears prick her eyes. At least someone in this family had a heart. Come with me. I'll get you set up at our table. Joe, Shanice, please join us. Caroline led them away from Elliot, who stood frozen, torn between following them and fleeing back to the safety of his mother's side. Lila didn't look back. She let Caroline guide them to a table near the edge of the tent, away from the center where Patricia held court. I'm glad you came, Caroline whispered as she pulled out a chair for Lila. Someone needed to shake things up around here. Your mother seems less pleased. My mother's terrified. She's been controlling Elliot's life for 42 years, and you're the first thing she hasn't been able to manage. Caroline squeezed her hand. Give her hell, Lila, please. He needs someone strong enough to fight for him, because he's never learned to fight for himself. Servers appeared with champagne. Lila took a glass, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Around them, the party continued, but she could feel the stares, the whispers, the judgment. She was the spectacle now, the drama that everyone would talk about later, but she was also visible. Finally, gloriously visible. Joe leaned close. You good? I'm perfect. And in that moment, she was. Terrified and exhilarated, and finally done hiding. The afternoon wore on. Lila made conversation with the people around her, most of whom were curious and surprisingly kind once they got over their initial shock. She talked about her marketing firm, about growing up in Brooklyn, about her love of art galleries and historical fiction. She was charming and educated and sophisticated, and she could see some of the guests reassessing their assumptions. Not everyone was welcoming. Some people were openly hostile, making comments about certain kinds of people and knowing your place. Lila smiled through it all, her armor firmly in place. She watched Elliot across the party, saw him being pulled in different directions, his mother's friends wanting to talk to him, business associates cornering him for conversations, all while he kept glancing in Lila's direction with a mixture of panic and something else, something that looked almost like pride. The afternoon sun started to dip lower, casting golden light across the garden. A server announced that dinner would be served in 30 minutes, and guests began moving toward the main tent where tables had been arranged. Lila excused herself to use the restroom, needing a moment alone to breathe. Carolyn directed her back through the house to a powder room off the main hallway. Lila closed the door behind her and leaned against the sink, studying her reflection. She looked composed, elegant, unshakable, but underneath she was trembling. What had she done? What was she doing? This wasn't solving anything. This was making everything worse. Elliot would never forgive her for this public humiliation. Patricia would make sure Lila paid for this intrusion for the rest of her life. She'd burned every bridge, created every bit of drama she'd been trying to avoid for 3 years. The door opened. Lila expected Caroline or maybe Shanice, but instead, Patricia Andrews walked in, closing the door behind her with a soft click. They stared at each other in the mirror. "You have a lot of nerve," Patricia said finally, her voice cold. "I'm attending my mother-in-law's birthday party. That doesn't require nerve. That requires a marriage, which I have. You have a piece of paper. You don't have my son." "Actually, I have both." Patricia turned to face her directly. "You really think this little stunt will change anything? You think showing up here uninvited, embarrassing Elliot in front of our friends and family, will somehow make me accept you?" "I don't need your acceptance," Lila said, turning to face her as well. "I'd like it. I'd hoped for it. But I don't need it. What I need is for my husband to stop asking me to make myself invisible so you can remain comfortable in your prejudice." "How dare you? How dare you?" Lila's voice was quiet but fierce. "How dare you make your son choose between his mother and his wife? How dare you treat me like I'm not good enough to exist in your presence? How dare you spend 3 years pretending I don't exist and then act like I'm the problem when I refuse to disappear?" Patricia's face flushed. "You have no idea what you've cost him, the opportunities he's lost, the doors that have closed because he married you. His career's fine. His business is thriving. The only thing he's lost is his mother's approval, and maybe that's a price worth paying for love." "Love," Patricia said the word like it was poison. "Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't maintain our family's position. Love doesn't erase the fact that you're completely wrong for him." "Wrong how? Wrong because I'm black? Wrong because I didn't grow up with trust funds and country clubs? Wrong because I built my own business instead of inheriting one? Or wrong because I'm the only person in his life who actually expects him to have a spine? You're vulgar. No, I'm honest, and you're terrified. You're terrified that if Elliot chooses me over you, you'll lose control over him. You're terrified that your friends will judge you for having a black daughter-in-law. You're terrified that the precious world you've spent your whole life protecting will change, will evolve, will become something you can't control." Lila stepped closer. "But here's the truth, Patricia. That world is already changing, with or without your permission. You can either change with it, or you can be left behind clinging to your racism and your outdated values while your son builds a life that doesn't include you." Patricia's hand moved so fast Lila didn't see it coming. The slap cracked across her cheek, sharp and stunning. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lila's face stung. Patricia's hand trembled, and in the silence between them was 3 years of tension finally exploding into violence. The door burst open. Elliot stood there, his face white with shock and fury. "Mother, what did you just do?" Patricia's composure cracked. "Elliot, I saw what she did. She defended herself, and I saw what you did." He looked at his mother like he was seeing her for the first time. "You hit my wife. She provoked me. She told you the truth, and you couldn't handle it." Elliot crossed to Lila, gently turning her face to examine her cheek. His touch was tender, heartbroken. "Are you okay?" Lila nodded, not trusting her voice. Elliot turned back to his mother. "I've spent my entire life trying to make you proud, trying to live up to your expectations, trying to be the son you wanted, and I thought if I just gave you time, if I just kept trying, you'd eventually accept the woman I love. Elliot, but you won't, will you? You're never going to accept her. You're never going to see past her skin color. You're never going to let her be part of this family. She's not one of us." "You're right, she's not. She's better, she's kinder, she's stronger. She doesn't care about the right schools or the right connections or the right bloodlines. She cares about people, about love, about building something real instead of just preserving something old." He took Lila's hand. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't say this 3 years ago. I'm sorry I let you spend our entire marriage feeling like you had to earn your place. I'm sorry I asked you to make yourself smaller so my mother could feel bigger. I'm sorry I was too much of a coward to choose you over her." "Elliot, please," Patricia said, and for the first time, Lila heard fear in her voice. "Don't do this. Don't throw everything away for love? For my wife? For my future?" Elliot's voice was steady. "I'm not throwing anything away, Mother. You are. You're choosing your prejudice over your son. You're choosing your pride over your family. You're choosing to be alone rather than make room in your life for someone who doesn't look like you." He pulled Lila toward the door. "We're leaving, and we're not coming back until you can apologize to my wife and mean it. Until you can treat her with the respect and dignity she deserves. Until you can be the mother I always wanted you to be instead of the one you've proven yourself to be. If you walk out that door, then I walk out, and you'll have to live with the knowledge that you chose racism over family, that you chose hate over love, that you lost your son because you couldn't let go of your bigotry." They walked out, through the hallway, through the foyer, past the staring guests who'd heard the raised voices, past the servers and the musicians and the carefully curated facade of old money elegance. Lila's face throbbed, her heart pounded, her knees felt weak, but Elliot's hand was steady in hers, pulling her forward, choosing her finally, publicly, irrevocably. Joe and Shanice appeared from the garden, took one look at their faces, and followed without questions. They made it to the car. Elliot opened the door for Lila, helped her inside with gentle hands. Joe drove, and they pulled away from the estate in silence, leaving the party and Patricia and 3 years of pain behind them. It was only when they were back on the highway that Elliot spoke. "I should have done that 3 years ago." Lila looked at him, at her husband, who'd finally found his courage when it mattered most. "You did it today, that's what counts." "She hit you," his voice broke. "My mother hit you, and I let this go on for so long that she thought she had the right to—" "Stop." Lila took his face in her hands. "You made a choice today. You chose me. You chose us. That's all that matters now." He pulled her close, burying his face in her neck. She felt him shaking, felt the tears he was trying to hold back. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you so much, and I'm so sorry I didn't show you that enough. I'm so sorry I let you feel alone." "I know." She held him, this man she'd married with such hope, this man who'd finally become the husband she needed. "I know you do." They drove back to the city in the darkening evening, leaving Connecticut and Patricia and the past behind. The future was uncertain. Patricia might never forgive them. The family might fracture beyond repair. There would be consequences for this choice, prices to pay for finally standing up. But Lila had her husband's hand in hers. She had her dignity intact. She had finally been seen, been claimed, been chosen. And that, she thought, as Manhattan's lights came into view, was worth everything. The confrontation is just the beginning. Subscribe to see how Lila rebuilds her marriage and her relationship with the Andrews family, and whether Patricia can ever truly change. Chapter 3. The penthouse felt different when they returned. Lila couldn't quite explain it, but walking through the door felt less like entering a cage and more like coming home. Maybe it was because Elliot was beside her, truly beside her, for the first time in 3 years. Maybe it was because something fundamental had shifted when he'd stood up to his mother. Maybe it was because Lila had finally stopped asking permission to take up space. Elliot paced the living room while Lila sat on the couch, an ice pack pressed to her still stinging cheek. Joe and Shanice had offered to stay, but Lila had sent them home. This conversation needed to happen between husband and wife, without witnesses or backup or distractions. "I can't believe she hit you," Elliot said for the 10th time. "I can't believe my own mother physically struck you." "It happened. Now what are we going to do about it?" He stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what happens next? You made a grand gesture at the party. You defended me. You stood up to Patricia. That was brave and wonderful and everything I needed from you." Lila lowered the ice pack. "But grand gestures aren't the same as changed behavior. So what happens on Monday? What happens at Thanksgiving? What happens the next time your mother calls?" Elliot sat down beside her, taking her free hand. "I don't know. I haven't thought past getting you out of there safely." "Well, start thinking." Because I need to know that today wasn't just a moment. I need to know that you're committed to building a different kind of marriage, a different kind of relationship with your family. I need to know that I'm not going to wake up in 6 months and find us back where we started. We won't be. How do I know that? The question hung between them, heavy with 3 years of broken promises and good intentions that had never materialized into real change. Elliot was quiet for a long moment, staring at their clasped hands. When he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. You don't know. You have no reason to trust me when I say things will be different. I've said it before, and I didn't follow through. I made promises I didn't keep. I asked you to be patient while I asked you to be invisible, and that's not patience. That's erasure. He looked up at her, tears in his eyes. I can't undo the last 3 years. I can't take back the pain I caused by being too weak to stand up to my mother. But I can promise you this. I'm done prioritizing her comfort over your dignity. I'm done asking you to shrink so she can feel big. I'm done with separate holidays and excluded events and pretending that our marriage can exist in the shadows. Pretty words, Lila said gently. But I need more than words. I know. So here's what I'm proposing. Therapy. For both of us, individually and together. I need to understand why I've been such a coward. You need space to process the damage I've done, and we need help rebuilding trust. Lila felt something loosen in her chest. Therapy. Actual, concrete action instead of empty promises. What else? She asked. Boundaries with my mother. Real boundaries. She doesn't get to call at all hours demanding my presence. She doesn't get to make passive-aggressive comments about you or our marriage. She doesn't get access to our life unless and until she can treat you with respect. And if she can't do that, then she doesn't get access at all. She'll never speak to you again. Then that's her choice. I'm done sacrificing my marriage to maintain a relationship with someone who can't see past her own bigotry. He squeezed her hand. You are my family now, Lila. You, not her. And I should have made that clear the day we got married. Lila felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she'd needed for 3 years, this clarity, this commitment, this unequivocal choosing. And the holidays? She asked, because Thanksgiving is in 3 weeks and Christmas is coming after that. We spend them together. If we're invited somewhere that you're welcome, we go together. If you're not welcome, then neither am I. And if that means we spend every holiday for the rest of our lives, just the two of us, then that's what we do. Your mother will hate that. My mother will have to deal with it. I'm not negotiating our marriage anymore. I'm not compromising your dignity for anyone's approval, including hers. Lila studied his face, looking for cracks, for doubts, for the weakness that had characterized their relationship for so long. But she saw only determination and grief and love. Okay, she said finally. Okay. But the first time you backslide, the first time you choose her comfort over my dignity, the first time you ask me to make myself smaller, I'm done. I won't do this again. I won't spend another 3 years waiting for you to grow a spine. I'll leave. And I won't come back. I understand. And I won't give you a reason to leave. I promise you, Lila. This time, I promise you. He kissed her then, soft and tender, like a vow. And for the first time in 3 years, Lila let herself believe that maybe they could build something real. They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, in a way they hadn't in months, about what had gone wrong, about the small hurts that had accumulated into gaping wounds, about the moments when Lila had needed him and he'd chosen his mother's approval instead, about the fear that had kept him trapped in patterns he knew were destroying his marriage. I was scared, Elliot admitted as they sat together on the couch, city lights twinkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Terrified, actually. My mother has always been this force in my life. Growing up, she controlled everything. What schools I attended, what activities I did, who I could be friends with. My father was too passive to stand up to her, so she just ruled. And I learned that keeping her happy was the only way to have peace. But I'm not asking you to choose between me and your peace, Lila said. I'm asking you to choose between me and your mother's prejudice. Those aren't the same thing. I know. And I know that somewhere along the way I confused love with obedience. I thought being a good son meant doing whatever my mother wanted, even when what she wanted was wrong, even when it cost me the woman I love. Why didn't you see it sooner?" Elliot was quiet for a long moment. Because it was easier not to. Because acknowledging the problem meant I'd have to do something about it, and doing something about it meant risking my relationship with my mother. And I kept thinking if I just gave her more time, if I just kept trying, she'd come around. I kept believing that the mother I wanted her to be would eventually show up. But she didn't. No, she didn't. And today, watching her hit you, seeing the cruelty in her eyes, I finally understood that she's never going to be the mother I want her to be. She's going to be who she is, and I have to decide if I can have a relationship with that person without sacrificing my marriage. And can you? I don't know. Right now, I don't even want to. Right now, I don't want her anywhere near us. They went to bed that night wrapped around each other, seeking comfort in physical closeness after the trauma of the day. Elliot held her like she might disappear, his face buried in her hair, his arms tight around her waist. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I know I haven't shown it well, but I do. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I almost lost you because I was too afraid to fight for you. You fought for me today. I should have fought for you every day." Lila turned in his arms to face him. Even in the darkness, she could see the outline of his features, the strong jaw and straight nose and blue eyes that had first captured her attention at that gallery opening all those years ago. "We can't go back," she said. "We can only go forward. So let's focus on that, on building something better." He kissed her, slow and deep, pouring 3 years of apology into the touch. She let herself sink into it, let herself feel the love that had always been there underneath all the hurt and disappointment. They made love that night with a tenderness that felt like healing, like reunion, like two people finding their way back to each other after a long journey through darkness. The next morning, Elliot's phone started ringing before dawn. Patricia. He looked at the screen, looked at Lila, and declined the call. She called back immediately. He declined again. By the time they'd finished breakfast, Patricia had called 17 times, left 12 voicemails, and sent 23 text messages ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. Elliot didn't answer any of them. "She's going to keep calling," Lila said, watching him decline yet another call. "Let her. I told her my terms. Until she can apologize to you and mean it, we have nothing to discuss." "She's never going to apologize." "Then I guess we have nothing to discuss." The certainty in his voice sent warmth through Lila's chest. This was what partnership looked like. This was what it meant to be chosen. Caroline called mid-morning. Elliot answered that one. "Are you okay?" his sister asked, her voice tight with worry. "Mother is losing her mind. She's called me 15 times. She's talking about disowning you, cutting you off, removing you from the family trust. Let her." "Elliot, I mean it, Caroline. Let her do whatever she thinks will bring me to heal. I'm done. I'm done prioritizing her feelings over my wife's dignity. I'm done pretending that loving Lila is something I need to apologize for. I'm done with all of it." There was silence on the other end, and then Caroline said quietly, "Good. It's about damn time. You're not mad?" "Mad? I'm relieved. I've been watching you torture yourself for 3 years, watching Lila suffer, watching Mother get more and more controlling. Someone needed to break the pattern." She paused. "How is Lila? Is she okay?" Mother's version of events is that Lila provoked her, but I don't believe that for a second. Lila was defending herself from Mother's racism, and Mother responded by hitting her. Caroline swore softly. "I'm so sorry. Tell Lila I'm so sorry, and tell her I'm proud of her for showing up. Someone needed to force this family to look at itself, and she was brave enough to do it." They talked for a few more minutes, Caroline promising to run interference with their mother when she could, but making it clear she wouldn't choose sides. "She's still my mother," Caroline said, "but you're my brother, and Lila is my sister-in-law, and I love you both. I just wish none of this had to happen." "It had to happen," Elliot said. "We couldn't keep going the way we were going. Something had to break." After he hung up, Lila asked, "Do you regret it, standing up to her?" "Not for a second. I only regret that I didn't do it sooner." The days that followed were strange. Elliot and Lila moved through their routines, work, meals, evenings at home, but everything felt different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted that neither of them had fully realized they'd been carrying. They started therapy the following week, individual sessions and couples counseling, diving into the patterns that had nearly destroyed their marriage. Lila talked about feeling invisible, about the accumulation of small rejections that had eroded her self-worth. Elliot talked about his fear of disappointing his mother, about the ways he'd been trained since childhood to prioritize Patricia's approval over his own needs. "You've been practicing a form of emotional abandonment," their couples therapist said during their third session. "Elliot, every time you chose your mother's comfort over Lila's dignity, you were telling Lila that her pain didn't matter as much as Patricia's prejudice. And Lila, you accepted that treatment for so long that you started to believe you didn't deserve better." "I never wanted to hurt her," Elliot said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you did. And the first step toward healing is acknowledging the harm you've caused and committing to different behavior going forward." It was hard work, painful work. There were sessions where they both cried, where old wounds were reopened and examined, but slowly, carefully, they started to rebuild trust. Elliot proved his commitment in small ways at first. He started introducing Lila as his wife in every context, professional and social. He put their wedding photo, the one with only Caroline from his family, on his office desk where clients and colleagues could see it. He turned down an invitation to his prep school reunion when the organizer made a snide comment about bringing dates that made it clear spouses weren't welcome. "I would have gone alone before," Elliot admitted to Lila after he'd declined. "I would have convinced myself it wasn't a big deal, that it was just one night, that you'd understand. But the therapist is right. Every time I go somewhere without you, I'm sending a message, and I'm done sending that message." Thanksgiving approached. Patricia sent a formal invitation to their family dinner, addressed only to Elliot. He sent it back with a note. "Lila and I are a package deal. We're both invited, or neither of us are coming." Patricia called, furious. Elliot let it go to voicemail. They spent Thanksgiving at Joe and Shanice's instead, surrounded by Lila's family, eating Shanice's famous mac and cheese and her mother's sweet potato pie. It was loud and warm and full of laughter, and when Joe made a toast thanking everyone for being there, Elliot squeezed Lila's hand under the table. "This is family," he whispered to her. "This is what it should feel like." "It can feel like this with your family too," Lila whispered back, "if your mother ever decides to change. And if she doesn't, we'll build our own family, with people who actually love us." December brought more challenges. Patricia launched a campaign of guilt and manipulation, calling Caroline and other family members to complain about Elliot's disrespect. She told anyone who would listen that Lila had poisoned her son against her, that Elliot had been perfectly fine until that woman got her claws into him. Some people believed her. Elliot lost some friendships, some business connections, some relationships he'd thought were solid. It hurt, but it also clarified things. The people who sided with Patricia over blatant racism weren't people he wanted in his life anyway. But there were surprises, too. Some of Patricia's friends reached out privately to Elliot, expressing support. "Your mother is wrong," one woman wrote. "I'm ashamed it's taken me this long to say so, but she's wrong, and you're right to stand up for your wife." Caroline hosted Christmas at her apartment, inviting both Elliot and Lila, and explicitly not inviting Patricia. It was a small gathering, just Carolyn and her husband, Elliot and Lila, and a few close friends, but it was filled with warmth and acceptance. "Mother is furious I didn't invite her," Carolyn said as they opened presents. "But I told her I'm not hosting racism in my home. If she wants to be part of this family, she needs to accept all of us." "She won't," Elliot said. "Maybe not, but that's her choice to make." As winter turned to spring, Lila and Elliot found their rhythm. They went to therapy. They really talked about their feelings and fears. They rebuilt intimacy, both emotional and physical. They made decisions together about their future, where to spend holidays, what events to attend, how to handle Patricia's continued attempts at manipulation. Lila's business thrived. Without the constant emotional drain of managing Elliot's family drama, she had energy to pour into her marketing firm. She landed 3 major clients, hired 2 new employees, and was featured in a business magazine profile about successful women entrepreneurs. Elliot sent the article to Caroline with a note. "This is who Mother said wasn't good enough for our family. This brilliant, accomplished, extraordinary woman. Mother's racism blinded her to what she could have had, an amazing daughter-in-law and a real relationship with her son." 6 months after the birthday party, Patricia called Elliot directly. He was at home with Lila when the call came through. They'd developed a system. Any communication with Patricia happened with Lila present. No secrets, no separate conversations. He put it on speaker. "Hello, Mother." "Elliot," Patricia's voice was stiff. "I'd like to speak with you. Lila's here. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of both of us." A long pause. Then, "Fine. I wanted to discuss the situation." "What situation would that be?" "This ridiculous estrangement. It's been 6 months, Elliot. This has gone on long enough." "I agree. It has gone on long enough. Your racism has gone on long enough. Your refusal to accept my wife has gone on long enough. Your control over my life has gone on long enough. I'm your mother, and Lila is my wife, and you hit her. You physically struck my wife because she had the audacity to tell you the truth about your prejudice." Another long pause. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was tight. "I may have overreacted that day. You assaulted her. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. You hit my wife, and you've spent 6 months refusing to acknowledge that what you did was wrong." "I'm acknowledging it now." "Are you? Because it doesn't sound like an apology. It sounds like you're trying to minimize what you did." Lila put her hand on Elliot's arm, steadying him. He took a breath. "Mother, I love you, but I love my wife more, and I can't have a relationship with you while you refuse to treat her with basic human decency. So here are my terms. You apologize to Lila. A real apology, not a non-apology where you say you're sorry she was offended. You commit to treating her with respect. You stop making racist comments, stop making her feel unwelcome, stop pretending she doesn't exist, and you do the work to understand why your behavior has been unacceptable. And if I don't, then we don't have a relationship. It's that simple. I'm not sacrificing my marriage to maintain a relationship with someone who can't see past her own bigotry." The silence stretched on for so long that Lila thought Patricia had hung up, but then she heard it, a small, choked sound that might have been a sob. "I don't know how to do this," Patricia said, and her voice was smaller than Lila had ever heard it. "I don't know how to admit I was wrong. I don't know how to be the kind of mother you're asking me to be." "Then learn," Elliot said. "Go to therapy, read books, talk to people who've done the work to overcome their prejudices, figure it out. Because you're not the victim here, Mother. Lila is. And until you can understand that, until you can take responsibility for the harm you've caused, we don't have anything else to discuss." "Elliot, I love you, but I love myself more. And I love my wife more. And I'm not going to keep lighting myself on fire to keep you warm. The ball is in your court. When you're ready to do better, call us back." He ended the call. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Elliot turned to Lila, his eyes searching her face. "Was that okay? Did I handle that right?" Lila pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. "You were perfect, firm but loving. Clear about boundaries, but leaving the door open for change. I'm proud of you." He buried his face in her neck. "I don't know if she'll ever change. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But you did your part. You set the boundary. You protected our marriage. That's all you can do. It doesn't feel like enough. It's everything." They spent the evening curled up together on the couch, processing the conversation, talking about their hopes and fears for the future. Lila found herself feeling something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Real, tangible hope that they could build the kind of marriage she'd always wanted. 2 weeks later, Caroline called with news. Mother started therapy. She told me last night. She's seeing someone who specializes in helping people work through prejudice and bias. "Is she actually doing the work, or is this performative?" Elliot asked. "I don't know yet, but it's a start. A real start. Keep me posted. But tell her not to reach out until her therapist thinks she's ready. I meant what I said. I'm not having her back in our lives until she's actually changed. I will. And Elliot, I'm proud of you. I know this isn't easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the right thing. Spring became summer. Lila and Elliot celebrated their 4th anniversary with a weekend trip to the Berkshires, staying at a bed and breakfast where they could hike and read and exist in their own bubble away from family drama and work stress. 4 years, Lila said as they watched the sunset from their porch. 3 of them pretty terrible. And 1 getting better, Elliot added. I know that's not a great ratio, but I'm hoping the trajectory matters more than the history. It does. We can't change the past, but we can build a better future. Together? Together? In July, Patricia called again. This time, she asked to meet with them in person, with her therapist present. They agreed to meet at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant in Manhattan. Patricia looked different, older maybe, or just more human. The imperious facade had cracked, revealing someone uncertain and vulnerable underneath. Her therapist, Dr. Hill, was a warm Asian woman in her 50s who immediately put both Lila and Elliot at ease. Thank you both for coming, she said. I know this is difficult. Patricia has asked for this meeting because she has some things she'd like to say, and she wanted support while she said them. Patricia looked at Lila, and for the first time, there was no coldness in her eyes. Just regret. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice shaking slightly. A real one. I've spent the last 6 months in therapy examining my beliefs and behaviors, and I've come to understand that I caused you tremendous harm. I rejected you because of your race. I treated you as less than human because of the color of your skin. I made you feel unwelcome in your own family because I couldn't see past my own prejudice. And when you confronted me about it, I responded with violence. Tears slipped down Patricia's cheeks. There's no excuse for what I did. None. I was wrong. Completely, unequivocally wrong, and I'm so deeply sorry for the pain I caused you. Lila felt her own eyes fill with tears. This was what she'd needed. This acknowledgement, this taking of responsibility. I don't expect you to forgive me, Patricia continued. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I see the harm I caused. I see it, and I'm working every day to be better. I'm reading books by Black authors. I'm attending workshops on anti-racism. I'm examining the ways I benefited from white supremacy without even realizing it. I'm doing the work, Lila, real work, because I love my son, and he loves you, and I don't want to lose both of you because I was too stubborn to change. Patricia looked at Elliot. And I'm sorry to you too, sweetheart. I'm sorry I put you in an impossible position. I'm sorry I made you choose between your mother and your wife. I'm sorry I let my racism damage our relationship. You deserved better from me. You both did. The room was quiet, except for the sound of crying. Patricia crying, Lila crying, even Elliot with tears streaming down his face. Dr. Hill passed around tissues. Lila, Elliot, you don't need to respond right now. This is Patricia taking accountability. What you do with that accountability is up to you. Lila looked at Patricia, really looked at her, and saw something she'd never seen before. Genuine remorse, genuine effort to change. It didn't erase 3 years of pain, but it was a beginning. I appreciate your apology, Lila said carefully, and I'm glad you're doing the work. But I need you to understand that trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I need to see consistent changed behavior before I can let my guard down around you. I understand, and I'm prepared to earn your trust however long that takes. Okay, then we can start there, slowly, carefully, with boundaries. They met with Patricia once a month after that, always with Dr. Hill present at first. The conversations were awkward and often painful, but they were real. Patricia talked about her upbringing, about the casual racism that had been so normalized in her family that she'd never questioned it. She talked about her fears of change, her anxiety about what her friends would think, her realization that she'd prioritized social acceptance over her own son's happiness. I was so afraid of being judged, Patricia admitted during one session. So afraid that if people knew my son had married a black woman, they'd look down on me, on our family, on our social standing. But I've realized that I was choosing the approval of people whose opinions don't actually matter over the love of my own child. And that's a terrible way to live. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt something. Not the relationship they'd had before, that was too broken to repair, but a new relationship founded on honesty and boundaries and accountability. By the time their 5th anniversary rolled around, Patricia had been to their apartment 3 times. She'd brought flowers each time, addressed to Lila specifically. She'd asked about Lila's business, actually listened to the answers, and offered to introduce Lila to some potential clients. She'd attended a family dinner at Joe and Shanice's, where she'd been polite and warm and had eaten 2 servings of Shanice's mac and cheese while praising the recipe. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, still times when Patricia said something thoughtless and had to catch herself. But she was trying. Really, genuinely, trying. "I don't know if we'll ever be close," Lila told Elliot one night as they prepared for bed. "I don't know if I'll ever fully trust her not to hurt me again, but I'm glad she's in our lives. I'm glad you don't have to choose anymore." "I'd still choose you," Elliot said, pulling her into his arms. "Every time I'd choose you." "I know, but it's nice that you don't have to." They stood at their bedroom window, looking out at the city lights, wrapped around each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. Behind them, on the dresser, was a new wedding photo, this one taken just last month, with Joe and Shanice, Carolyn and her husband, and yes, Patricia, all standing with them, all smiling, all together. It had taken 4 years, 1 devastating confrontation, and countless hours of therapy to get here. But they'd made it. They'd built something real and strong, something that couldn't be shaken by prejudice or fear or family drama. "I love you," Lila whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Elliot whispered back. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for being brave enough to show up to that party. Thank you for demanding better. I wouldn't be here without you. We're here together. That's what matters." And it was. They'd weathered the storm, they'd fought for their marriage, they'd chosen each other again and again, until choosing each other became second nature. Some tables, Lila thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, some tables were worth flipping over, some spaces were worth demanding entry to, some relationships were worth fighting for, even when the fighting was hard and painful and seemed impossible. And some love was worth everything. The next morning, Lila woke to the smell of coffee. She found Elliot in the kitchen, making breakfast, humming to himself. When he saw her, his face broke into a smile, the smile that had first captured her attention at that gallery opening all those years ago. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, pulling her close. "I made pancakes. The real kind, not the fancy ones from that restaurant you hate." She laughed, pressing her face into his chest. "You hate making pancakes. I know, but you love them. And making you happy is my favorite thing in the world." They ate breakfast together at their kitchen counter, the morning sun streaming through the windows, painting everything gold. Elliot's phone buzzed with work emails. Lila's laptop chimed with client messages. But for this moment, they ignored it all, existing in their bubble of contentment. "What do you want to do today?" Elliot asked. "I don't know. Something normal, something boring, something that has nothing to do with family drama or past trauma or healing old wounds." "Want to go to that gallery in Chelsea? The one where we met?" Lila smiled. "That sounds perfect." They spent the afternoon wandering through art galleries, holding hands, debating the merit of modern installations, and making fun of pretentious artist statements. They had lunch at a small cafe, shared a dessert, and walked home through the park as the sun set over the city. It was ordinary. It was simple. It was everything they'd fought for, the chance to just be together, to enjoy each other's company, to build a life based on love instead of obligation or shame or fear. That night, as they curled up on the couch to watch a movie, Lila's phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I'll keep working to be worthy of the grace you've shown me. You're a remarkable woman, Lila. I'm honored to know you." Lila showed the message to Elliot. He read it and smiled. "She's trying." "She is. It's weird seeing her try. Good weird or bad weird? Just weird, but in a hopeful way." Lila texted back, "Thank you for doing the work. That's all I ever wanted, for you to try." She set the phone down and settled back into Elliot's arms. The movie played on the screen, but Lila wasn't really watching. She was thinking about the journey that had brought them here, about the girl who'd married a billionaire, thinking love would be enough. About the woman who'd learned that love without respect was just a pretty lie. About the wife who'd crashed a party and demanded to be seen. She thought about all the women who might be where she'd been 3 years ago, invisible, tolerated, waiting for the people they loved to choose them. She hoped they'd find the courage to demand better, to stop shrinking, to show up uninvited if that's what it took to be seen. Because nobody should have to earn their place in their own life. Nobody should have to prove they're worthy of basic dignity. Nobody should have to choose between love and self-respect. Lila had spent 3 years learning that lesson the hard way, but she'd learned it. And now, wrapped in her husband's arms, secure in her worth, she understood that the greatest gift you could give yourself was refusing to disappear. She was Lila Grant Andrews. She was a successful businesswoman, a beloved sister, a cherished daughter, and a wife who demanded to be treated as such. She took up space. She showed up uninvited. She refused to be invisible. And that, she thought as she drifted off to sleep, was exactly as it should be. Some tables are meant to be crashed. Some parties are meant to be disrupted. Some prejudices are meant to be confronted head-on, regardless of the discomfort it causes. Because love without dignity isn't love at all. And a wife who's asked to hide isn't really a wife. She's a secret. Lila was done being anyone's secret. She was done being invisible. She was done making herself smaller so other people could feel bigger. She was here. She was seen. She was chosen. And that was worth every uncomfortable conversation, every difficult boundary, every moment of standing her ground when it would have been easier to back down. That was worth everything. Thank you so much for listening to Lila's journey from invisible to undeniable. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Dear Love Diaries and hit that notification bell for more powerful romance stories about women who refuse to shrink. Drop a comment telling me what moment resonated with you most. Was it when Lila showed up to the party, when Elliot finally chose her, or when Patricia did the work to change? I love hearing from you. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be chosen, celebrated, and seen. Never settle for being someone's secret. See you in the next story.